Welcome, everyone. I want to give a welcome to all of you in the room here now, but also to any who are joining us on our live stream. So you haven't already heard, I want to just make clear, we've got a camera here and a camera here, and we do have some other members of the community who have joined virtually. And they're going to be able to ask questions virtually as well. So just a heads up that we do have those cameras running there, and the recording of the session will be uploading on the website as well. So you can always come back and refer to the conversations that we have today. My name's Scott Newton. I'm the facilitator. My job is to guide us through the next hour and a half, and from my perspective, make sure that you get the chance to ask as many questions, get as many responses as you can in the time that we've got. So the purpose of today is to provide an update on the project and to answer those further questions, area of community interests and concerns that have been coming up, right, that we were aware of, as well as any other questions that you want to ask during your time here today. And it's nice to be able to come together and be in a room like this. I would like to, before we go any further, welcome Uncle Bunja, here he is, to welcome us to country.
Everyone always struggles with the language as Bunja. Not a problem, my brother, not a problem. The language, as we know, is the Duriga language of the Wabunga people of this area that covers pretty much from Ulladulla down past Narooma. And I'd just like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and perform Welcome to Country today. But I can't go past the international events that are occurring at the moment. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the Ukraine and pay my respects to their elders, their tribes people, past, present, and hopefully those that will emerge out of the travesty that we're seeing abroad at the moment. So I'd like to thank Health Infrastructure and the LHD for inviting me along to do Welcome to Country. And I'd like to welcome our special guest today. Brad, it's good to see you again. It's been a while. And Dr. Michael Holland, thank you. And Andrew's here somewhere too, I think. Andrew. Yeah, look, welcome special guests. I also want to welcome you, especially what I consider my community, my people that I live and work amongst. And some of you have got to know me, but I've got a bit of a saying that there's no such thing as a stranger. There's only the friends that I haven't met yet. So, don't be afraid to come and say good day to me if you ever see me out and about in Maruya or the Bay or anywhere like that. Always happy to have a chat. So, in our language we say Wallawani, which is safe journey, and Ninjawan, which is everyone. So Wallawani, Ninjawan. Numalaga Indigada, Maigani, Wabunga Banja, Gurad Maruya. Gurad is earth. Gurad Moruya, Wally. I welcome you today, and may we have a productive meeting. And we pay our respects to the Wabunja people as well, to the elders and tribes people past, present and emerging. Some of you probably remember Annie Coop. She was a bit of an icon here in Maruya, long missed. And her and my mother were like two peas in a pod. They hung out everywhere together. But look, that's it from me. Welcome everyone today. And like I said, come and have a yarn if you want to. You'll find me a very open person. Thank you, Scott.
Beautiful. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you. So, as Uncle was saying, this is an opportunity for us to have a really productive meeting. And I think what stood out to me when I was asked to come and help facilitate today is that ultimately this is a room full of people trying to make sure that this hospital is as effective as it can be, that it's as sensitive to the surrounding community needs. And so I'm excited for this hour and a half to be an opportunity for us to work through that, to discuss that as much as we can in our time here. So the focus will be to provide you with an opportunity to hear from New South Wales Government, from the project team specifically, on questions that you've raised either before or we will today. So there's a few ways that we're going to do that. Firstly, we're going to hear from our Minister on the project as a whole at a higher level. And then we're going to look at, from the project team, some of the questions that you've already asked. So they've actually prepared a presentation that will give them a chance to speak to some of the things that we are aware of, that you're coming into today with questions. And then we'll open up So we're going to have an opportunity to hear any extra questions that you've got today. And once again, there's two ways that we're going to do that. So the first is through Slido. So you'll find that on your chairs here, you've got a QR code that we had there, and we've also added it at the Rego desk, and it's appearing up here on the screen now. And I'll show this up again a little bit later, but I also encourage you now, if you can, feel free to scan on that page or scan up here on the screen. The reason why I've recommended that we use this is because I'm aware we've got quite a lot of people in the room and people online, right? So the beauty of this is it will allow us to capture questions as we're hearing from speakers, but you can also upvote. You can like the questions that you think are most important for us to address. And so what I promise I will do for you is, as well as taking questions from the room, I'll also keep checking back in on this. And if there's questions that I can see are right at the top that are the most popular, I'll make sure that we address those as a priority. Now, if there are any that we're not able to get to today, the project team has committed to putting that up on the project website, right? So we will provide those question responses there. So we will get to everything in whatever way we can while we're together. Now, throughout today's session, you'll also be hearing references to the website, to the project email, to further opportunities for you to have questions and to explore those with the project team as we go through. So please keep in mind that this isn't the only opportunity to walk through these conversations about the project today. But before I kick things off and formally hand over to the Minister, I just want to build on Uncle Bunge's references to a few people that we do have in the room. So in addition to the Minister for Health we'll hear from in a moment, we've got the Minister for Regional Health, Bronnie Taylor, who is among us somewhere. There we are, thank you. We've also got, I do know Dr. Michael Holland is here, member for Bega, thank you. We've got Andrew Constance is in the room somewhere, our Liberal candidate for the federal seat of Gilmore. We've also got Margaret Bennett, who is our Chief Executive of Southern New South Wales LHD in the back, in the blue blazer, thank you. And I also have just a few apologies to flag. So one of them is Megan Connors, who's the General Manager of the LHD's Coastal Network, and Catherine Lyons, who's the Director of Nursing and Midwifery, who have had leave on short notice, right? But we will take questions on if we need to and pass on for you. The Mayor of Eurobodalla Shire has also just wanted to pass on apologies. And finally, I would like to just pass on some thanks to Dr. Judy Toneman, who's the chair of the Eurobodalla Medical Staff Council, and also to Brad Rossiter, who's the chair of the Community Consultative Committee for the LHD, who've obviously played quite a role in getting us to this point. I think there's also some media we've got in the room, and obviously the focus will be there's a great chance for them to listen in and to record the conversations that you're having today. But I assure you the focus is on community. And on that note, I just want to finish with, we've got our obvious exit there for in the case of an emergency, as well as the toilets down the back if you haven't already seen them. And we're going to begin with a video that will set the scene for this conversation. So I don't know if any of you have seen this before, but the video talks about the process that New South Wales Government goes through for building a hospital, and it will kind of give us our framework, our context for the conversations today. So I'll throw to the team for that. Thank you.
Here at Health Infrastructure, we manage the Capital Works program for New South Wales Health, overseeing health service redevelopments valued at $10 million and above. Every redevelopment undergoes 3 distinct phases: planning, design, and delivery. This comprehensive process ensures our redevelopments meet the future health needs of the local community and staff. To kick off the planning process, we examine the Clinical Services Plan. Developed by the local health district, the Clinical Services Plan forms the foundation for our planning of the redevelopment. The Clinical Services Plan looks at least 10 years into the future, using current health data, census information, and projections of future local needs. Once we understand what's needed, we appoint a lead design team who develops a master plan for the hospital campus and considers the relationship with community-based services. The master plan looks at the entire campus, defining and identifying opportunities and constraints of the campus, including opportunities for future redevelopment zones. The development of the master plan allows us to begin consultation with select health staff and community members via project user groups. These user groups help to determine how the clinical services will be delivered. Information collected during this early planning phase enables us to create a high-level concept design. The concept design demonstrates the relationships between the clinical functions, services, buildings and other facilities both horizontally and vertically. We combine information gathered from the clinical services plan, master planning and the concept design to develop a business case. The business case outlines our scope for the project and determines our budget for the redevelopment. Following the completion of the business case, we engage further with project user groups to inform the schematic design planning phase. Schematic design provides the next level of detail, such as how rooms and services relate to each other and how patients and staff flow through the facility. Once schematic design is complete and reviewed by the project user groups, the redevelopment moves into the detailed design phase. During detailed design, the user groups look at the layout of every room and hospital space, such as the location of furniture, fittings and room colours, as well as the external facade and outside spaces. At this time, we also develop an arts and cultural strategy to give the facility a local, bright and welcoming feel with artwork, installations and wayfinding signage. Once our detailed design is finalised, we move into the delivery phase. This starts by issuing a tender to engage a construction company that can build a high-quality health service on time and to budget. Construction involves enabling work such as installing site fences and site offices, early works such as demolition and installation of in-ground services, main works, which includes building the structure and installing major furniture, fixtures and equipment, and refurbishments such as repurposing existing facilities for an alternative use. Construction is often divided into different stages, so our works have minimal disruption to patients and staff. Priority is always given to providing clinical services over construction. Once construction is complete, we begin the commissioning phase. This involves checking and testing of all components and systems of the new facility. Staff orientation and training also occurs to ensure everyone is prepared to welcome the first patients through the door. Once staff and patients have moved into their new facility, health infrastructure continues to evaluate and assess the functionality of the new facility for several months. This process also helps to inform our future hospital projects. This extensive planning, design and delivery process ensures that staff, clinicians and patients and visitors have a contemporary, bright and welcoming facility that meets their needs and the needs of future generations.
So we're going to hear in a moment from the Minister and the panel, and I'll just reiterate, because we want to give the bulk of the session today to the Q&A, we won't take questions during those, but then that will be the focus for the rest of the day. So I just encourage you again, the QR code that you've got, and you'll see a link that will appear up here at the bottom of the slide if you need it at any point. Please join that. Feel free to put some questions on to any of what you're hearing, and I promise you we will do our best to get to as many of them as we can once we're done. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the Minister for Health, Brad Hazzard.
Thanks very much.
Are you okay with that? Yeah.
Good afternoon. You guarantee that? Thank you. Thanks very much, guys. Can I start by just thanking Uncle for that very warm welcome to country. He's always a very good person that I have seen around here quite often over the years, so thank you for that. Can I also just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of the Yuin Nation, and just thank them for their custodianship for about 60,000 years. And to all of you, with the Aboriginal elders or others, thank you very much, and acknowledge and respect each one of you, your contribution. Can I also acknowledge the Regional Health Minister, who is sitting here, my very good colleague, Bronnie Taylor, and we work together on all these projects. And obviously being the Health Minister or the Regional Health Minister is a huge job, so we share that.
Can I acknowledge Andrew Constance, obviously my friend and colleague, but now a federal candidate and doing all of the work that he needs to do on that front. Obviously acknowledge also Dr. Holland and Amanda Brock, Kath Taylor, Matt Malone from Health Infrastructure, and Mark Bennett from the LHT. And I think we'll welcome everybody. Look, the purpose of this meeting is simply to make sure that the community has a clear understanding, both through attendance here today, but also through the live stream, of what is actually being built, where we're up to with it. It's effective. I want to make sure that there are no myths, no misinformation, no mistakes about what is actually being built. Every hospital that has been built in the Liberal National Government's period in office has been promised and delivered, every single one. So many of you would know that the South Eastern Regional Hospital, about 180 odd million, was promised, delivered. There's many more that perhaps you don't know. Mudgee was about 80 million, fabulous new hospital. Tamworth, lots of work going on at Dubbo. Tweed Hospital, which is now up to I think the 8th or 9th level, and fortuitously built, not in the flood areas. Every job that has been promised has been delivered. So that's the first thing. So what has been promised here will be delivered in exactly the same way, professionally, carefully, and consulted through along the way. Now, there's been lots of consultation. You just saw that very brief video, but it gives you an idea of how we go about building brand new hospitals. The issue for us is always to, first of all, start with consultation with the clinicians and the local health district. And I want to thank Marg and all her team have done incredible work going back now probably 3 years, because I think it was May 20, I think, when we got to the point where the clinical services plan, the first rendition of the clinical services plan for this area that the doctors had agreed on. Numerous meetings always take place, and of course doctors all have different views on what they want. They all have views about the broader health system, but they also have views on their own particular specialty, and those are all issues that need to be managed through to make sure that at the end of the day we get the best possible outcome for the community out of the taxpayers' money that's allocated. And I think initially this one was initially 150, and then Mark Bennett and the team pushed for more, and it went up to 200, and it's sitting at about 260 at the present time. 260 million, it's a lot of money, more than $250 million. So no one's going to make any mistakes about how this actually is designed through the clinical services plan, or through the master planning, or through the delivery. Now, I know I've heard that the government's not serious about this. Yes, it is. As I just said, we have never not built a hospital. The Liberal National Party has never, this Liberal National Government has never, since 2011, not built a hospital we promised to build. We've built them. And people absolutely love those new hospitals because I visit them. And what it does when you get a new hospital, it invigorates the staff, but it also acts as an attraction agent for doctors to come to town. I mean, doctors, particularly specialists, love their own specialty, so they want to have the best they can for patients. And that's exactly what we as a government want to, we as a community want. I know in Dubbo, that wasn't a complete rebuild. That's a lot of building new extensions, refurbishing. But I remember talking to some of the doctors up there, and they said we're having a lot less difficulty now getting specialists coming into our area because they know that we have a magnificent hospital. And that makes the difference. So it is build, and to some degree, hopefully they will come. But then obviously Mark Bennett and the team have to do a lot more work working with them to achieve that. I want to thank, each of these people here and Mark Bennett's team have been working on this project for 3 years. Most of you would know, if you try and build a house on a block of land, first of all, you've got to find the block of land. And that normally takes, I remember when I was looking around for land, it took me over 1.5 years to find a block of land. And then by the time you find the block of land, you've got to buy it. And then, of course, you've got to work out what you want to put on it. And then when you've worked that out, you've got to put that into council. Council can take quite a while. So it goes through those planning phases. And then you build. Normally takes about probably 6 months to a year to build a house. Hospitals normally about, this size hospital, around about 3 years from the time it actually commences construction. And then there's usually a commissioning phase. So the staff move in gradually, get to know the difference, because you can't just pick up staff and put it in another hospital. Put them in another hospital. You've got to make sure they know, where the gas fittings are, how the various equipment works in the new hospital. So that normally takes a few months. And then, of course, once that happens, the patients then move in. And sometimes there are some issues around that, I must say, because you can't just pick up all the staff and put them in a brand new hospital and think that the cultural issues are going to be exactly the same. It takes a little while to accommodate. And we've learnt that over quite a number of the hospitals that we've built. So all in all, I'm expecting this hospital will be up and running with patients in it 3 years from now, three to 3.5 years from now. And there is no doubt about that. Let me make that clear. I'm not going to go through all the detail, but I've heard things like, oh, you don't own the land yet. No, but there are processes. That's exactly why we have the Just Terms acquisition legislation, and notices get served. First of all, obviously, the government tries to negotiate the same way as you would if you were buying land for a house. Try and negotiate with the owner, and owners often, and I know I was just talking to a particular person about that, obviously they have other plans for the land. They don't want to just hand it over, and they want to get a good price for it. So as negotiations go on, often quite an extensive period of time. And then formally a notice is served under the Land Acquisition Just Terms legislation. And that was served, I understand, in December. And that means that by about the 3rd week of April, if no agreement is reached, the land will then be acquired compulsorily. And the owner, hopefully, and the health people will continue to discuss the value, but that's their area. And then we get on with the continuation of the master planning. Now, I'm not going to say much more except know this. This hospital is being built. This hospital will be delivered. We are intending that it is such a good facility that it will be built to the standard that will attract the specialists we need to bring it in at a level 4. Now, that's a hard ask because, as I said to you, getting, as Bronnie Taylor and I know, we've been working on with the federal government trying to attract doctors into regional areas. It's a hard ask. But there are doctors who will come when they know what we're building. And we're aiming to get, certainly, for example, there's already been money go into the hospital to set there'll be the precursor to a level 4 ICU, a level 4 ED, level 4 ICU if we can do it. So we are aiming to get the doctors for that. Now, can I say this? This will make such a difference to Moruya and the surrounding Eurobodalla area. I think it will really give people a new focus in this area because the level that is going to come from this hospital will just attract more and more people into the area and give them confidence about business generally, but living here. I know as we all get older, we like to think that we can be close to a major hospital, and certainly I feel that now. I think we all do as we get older, so it certainly attracts a lot more people into town. Now with that, I think I'm handing over to Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll take questions later on, but we'll go through right now if that's all right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you,
Thanks very much,
Minister.
everybody. And thank you all for coming out and actually taking part. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Because I know it's a busy time, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Alrighty, and can I say thank you too to those who are already popping questions into the Slido. So if anyone hasn't already, they are there if you would like to ask anything, either based on that speech or what we're going to hear next. So I'm going to introduce our panel so that they can start responding to a few more things that you have raised with us. So you already heard from the Minister, but just to give you their full titles, we've got Amanda Bock, closest to me. So she's the Executive Director of Rural and Regional. And then we've got, right down the end, Matthew Malone, who's the Senior Project Director of the Eurobodalla Regional Hospital redevelopment, and then Kath Taylor in the middle. So she's the Director Southern for Rural and Regional. So we are going to take the opportunity to present a few slides first before we go to the FAQ, and Amanda, who is ready to jump up, is going to start, and she's just going to give us a little bit of context on the timeline and the process of the project, which will then kind of give us the framework to ask all our questions within. Take it away, Amanda.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you everyone for coming. It's really nice to actually be here in person. We've done a lot of online consultation, and I think this is probably one of the first opportunities we've actually had to come together with a larger group of people because of COVID. So I must admit that has had its challenges through our consultation period, both with clinicians and the community, but it's really exciting to be here today. So thanks, Scott, and thank you, Uncle, for the welcome to country. Thank you, Minister, as well, for the introduction. So I do look after the rural and regional portfolio for New South Wales health infrastructure, and we're building a lot around the state, which is exciting because I have a building background and I love building. We watched our little video, which takes about 4 minutes, and I've always got this thing that I wish it could take us 4 minutes to build the hospital, but fortunately it doesn't, because if we did that, we'd probably get it wrong. So I'm just going to walk through the planning processes and where we're up to. And I need my glasses, sorry. So we talked about the clinical services plan being endorsed by the Ministry of Health, and we use that to inform our master planning process. So from that, we started looking at site options quite early on. We ran through a quite intensive process. When you consider floods and bushfires in this area, there was actually fairly limited opportunities for the site. But we did have had an extensive process. We had a great committee that we worked with clinicians and community members to inform that site selection, along with some Aboriginal consultation. So we announced that in December 2020, and from there we've moved into the master planning and functional briefing. So the master planning is where we start to map out the site, and we place the buildings on the site, we look at the other infrastructure that's around us, and it's really more of a diagrammatic process. I know there's been some concerns when the master plans were released, and we had some beautiful images to accompany them, that the design was done. It's by no means done. It's a very long process, and that is just the first part of it. In preparing the master plan, we consulted with many members of the community. In July, we undertook a walk on country with the local Aboriginal community, and that really helped us inform particularly the maternity services and birthing on country, and we appreciate the input we got from that. In August and September, we had virtual community information sessions, which hopefully many of you were able to attend. And we heard from ex-provision of services, maternity, paediatric imagery, radiotherapy and mental health services would be required as part of that process. We've also had queries about whether staff from South East Regional Hospital have been consulted, and they certainly have, along with the wider local health district staff and district staff. And we've also, as some of you may be aware, undertaking the Goulburn redevelopment at the moment, and we have used learnings from that to inform our planning process as well. We are also looking at clinical training facilities on the site, simulation training in the new facility, education and training facilities being delivered in conjunction with ANU, University of Canberra and University of Wollongong, and they will hopefully boost local education and training. We're now entering the schematic design process. This will allow the master plan to start to come to life. It's certainly, as I said, I have an architectural background and building background, and developing these plans with the architect, it's an evolving process. It's not a case of here's a drawing, let's go. It's certainly, there's a lot of iterations, there's a lot of discussion with staff, there's a lot of discussion with the community to make sure we get things right. Consultation through this phase is very vital. And since the release of the early designs in December, we've held sessions in February and will continue in March and April with the community to see what we need to know from you. As we progress through the more detailed design phases, we start to look at every individual room, so that's in the detailed design before we reach procurement. We map out every single room in the hospital or type of room. We look at where the bed will sit, we will look at where the chair will sit in a theatre, we'll look at how that theatre's designed, and there's a drawing for every single one of those rooms. That's a very involved process that we need to do to make sure we get it right. Fortunately, we also have the Australian Health Facility Guidelines, which inform that process, and if anyone's interested in that, you can actually go online and see all of the standard room layouts for all of those types of rooms that go into a hospital. It's publicly available. So up to this point, I can say that we've had 17 separate user groups, and that's just not individual groups. Each of those will meet with at least 2 to 3 times over a number of hours, and we're clocking up to around 300 hours of that consultation process. So it is quite involved, and whilst often it may not seem like there's a lot going on, there's so much going on in the background, and I know the team are working really hard to do that. So once we've got to around the end of schematic design, we'll move into our planning approval process, which has actually already started. As the Minister mentioned, it does take a long time to often get a DA even for your house, and obviously a hospital's fairly involved, and that can take some time, and it will often take us up to 12 months to get our planning approval through. But we have started that process, and the project is now live on the Department of Planning website at the start of that process, and anyone can access that and track it through that approval process. But there is public consultation that is run by Department of Planning to inform that process. So separate to us, they will seek your input on the design and all the other aspects of the project. There will be numerous reports attached to that around environmental, heritage, all of those aspects of the building approval process. We're expecting, so as I said, it's just started live on the website at the moment, and we're expecting getting close to mid-2022. When we've finalised our schematic design, we'll be in a position to submit what's called the environmental impact statement. That'll be advertised publicly. There will be submissions received, so there'll be a fair bit of time for people to respond to that. The department also seeks other government input from other key government stakeholders, and then we get sent and let me say, not individual submissions or not, we don't know we know the government submissions who they're from, but not obviously any individual that chooses to submit unless they choose to do so, and we need to respond to those before they will finalise our approval and give us that rubber stamp. So we look forward to, I guess, as that progresses, track it on the website, but we'll also obviously provide that information publicly. So I'll just quickly run through, I guess, where we're at with the scope before I hand over to the others to talk through some of the other aspects. So we're looking, obviously, we've talked about it, emergency department, intensive care unit, paediatric maternity, expanded medical imagery, flexible mental health beds, ambulatory care, surgical and rehab beds, and increased capacity for chemo treatments. Obviously, since late 2021, there's been aspects added, being the MRI and additional X-ray, the 8-bed intensive, or the extension to the 8-bed, the intensive care unit to be 8 beds, the paediatric and maternity services have been uplifted, and we've talked about flexible mental health beds. We're looking at around 140 beds in total for the hospital, which is obviously significantly more than what we've got. So I'll pause there because I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder and hand back to Scott, or no, straight to...
Yeah, if we head to the next slide, I
Sorry.
think Matt to jump up. Yeah.
Oh, Matt, straight to Matt.
Thank you, Amanda, and also Minister and Uncle Bunja. Hi everyone, my name, as mentioned earlier, is Matt Malone. I'm a Senior Project Director with Health Infrastructure, and I'm excited to be here today to share with everyone the process that we've gone through around master planning and some of the key considerations that go into that process. Thank you, Minister, for talking earlier to site acquisition. So I think we'll move into master planning now that shows how this hospital is situated on the site and considers how the hospital can and will expand into the future to continue to provide high quality health services. So the master plan guides the final hospital design, including the location of the key infrastructure to support clinical services. And those are elements like the emergency department, operating theatres, medical imaging, making sure that those key adjacencies can be resolved on the site through that master planning solution. The other consideration too is access requirements to actually get to the facility for numerous reasons, whether it's by road or by air. So some of the key considerations in developing this master plan were flood and bushfire zones, biodiversity zones on the site, There are existing flight paths in the area, and when we introduce a new helipad access, that also introduces a new flight path and needs to consider how it operates with the other existing flight paths and other obstructions in the area, in the local area. There's access routes, both primary and secondary to the site. Reason we talk about two accesses is inevitably it's a hospital. We need to make sure that we have emergency vehicle access for ambulances, and we will always look at a secondary access in the event that the main access is blocked to get vehicles onto that site. Areas of local significance, riparian zones, topography, so the slope and terrain of the site are other features that factor in master planning, and also cultural inputs. So to give you an idea of what I mean when I say cultural inputs, an example is that not putting a building on top of a hill, which is quite a European design from hundreds of years ago, and shifting that building off the top of the hill is a consideration that we look at from a cultural perspective. There are other culturally sensitive areas on the site, and we have been asked not to disclose the locations of those, but they do exist, and they do feature, or they do feed into how we design or master plan our site. So I mentioned earlier the helipad. We've designed this hospital with an on-grade helipad. That means it's a helipad that's not on the roof of the hospital, it's on ground level. We've included this in the design as necessary to transport patients to higher acuity facilities in Canberra and Sydney as necessary. A number of different locations on this site were looked at for the helipad, and the master plan that we chose with, that we ultimately selected, was devised through a close consultation with aviation specialists, and an area close to the emergency department is a key clinical adjacency for that service as well. This considered the site's topography, flood zones, asset protection zones, and cultural heritage areas, as well as those aviation requirements I spoke about earlier. Recently, we attended some community sessions in the local area at the end of Albert Street there, and we did get some feedback on the location of that helipad. We have heard that feedback, and we did commit to that community to come back with some response to those concerns. So we are in the process of that, and that is in hand at the moment. From a hospital access perspective, the main site hospital access for public and hospital vehicles is from the Princes Highway. This includes ambulances and other emergency vehicles. Within the site, there's a separated access to the emergency department from the general traffic access. You can see that up the top of the page there. And this is so that ambulances, emergency vehicles can access the ED, the emergency department, without having to use the main front of the hospital. They can get that separated access and get to the ED as efficiently as possible. The master plan shows a secondary access, again, for emergency vehicles off Caswell Street at the top of the master plan there. This access is intended to only be used in the event of a accident or a blockage or an obstruction on the Princes Highway that stops vehicles from coming in from that main entry point. It's not to be used for general or for staff access. Again, during our local community session, we did hear some concerns around the use of Caswell Street as a connection point. And I can see a lot of familiar faces in the room here. And again, we committed to coming back to that community with some response, which we are targeting to do so in April. I'll talk quickly to the Moruya Bypass project. Again, Transport for New South Wales are delivering that project. That's not something that we have oversight over, but we are working closely with the Transport for New South Wales team and the local council to integrate the planning of that bypass and the new regional hospital, including how the access is managed between the bypass, the existing highway, Moruya Town Centre and the hospital site. The hospital site entrance for all public vehicles is off the Princes Highway, as we mentioned, and this includes ambulance, and Transport for New South Wales are considering this in their design process for that Moruya Bypass project. Planning is underway for the design of the intersection of the Princes Highway, and residents in the local area will be consulted and informed of when that work is due to commence and how that work is expected to be delivered in the near future. I'll talk also to future-proofing. You can see a couple of, a fair few purple blobs on this diagram. They talk to future-proofing for future infrastructure. So there's lots of considerations that we take into account when master planning a site, future education expansion, future private providers, potentially. Accommodation is another key element, and the Southern New South Wales Local Health District provides staff accommodation in Maria and Bateman's Bay currently for visiting medical staff. Additional staff accommodation isn't planned as part of the Eurobodalla Regional Hospital. However, the master plan does identify the opportunity for that accommodation for staff into the future. Again, the other zones that we've highlighted on that map are for future car park and hospital expansion zones as well. So just a note here on design and what we've heard to date. We've had some feedback on our helipad and our secondary access. We've heard that visitors and staff would like to see clear access to landscaped areas from that building. So you can see it's been designed in such a way to make the most of the views in the local area and certainly towards the west, towards the ranges. We know that access and parking are always key areas of interest, and the plan and design looks to provide multiple points of parking and access to the main hospital and emergency department, and also that access to that Maria bypass is important as well. So we'll stop there and I'll pass over to Kath. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. And look, it's really lovely to be here again today. And I just wanted to say it's lovely to see some faces in the crowds. Thank you very much for turning up. I know we've had conversations before and it's lovely to see you here again today. I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't see very... Oh, sorry, can you hear? Sorry. I don't want to... Anyway, I'll just repeat that. It's lovely to see the faces in the crowds that we've met before, so thank you again for coming. Really appreciate your time today. Just building on what Matthew and Amanda have mentioned, also just in regards to the complication of the planning process, we can't actually start building on site until the DA is approved, but we will be doing some early works around the intersections that Matthew just mentioned, and they'll be starting later this year, and obviously there'll be a consultation process involved in that bit of planning as well. So, sorry, trying to manage multiple things. So look, I just wanted to just say how great it is to be here and just to talk about a couple of issues. One is connecting with country and just acknowledging obviously the fabulous input and expertise that we've received from the community to date. It is a pilot project that we are working with the government architect on, and it has been mentioned earlier by both Amanda and Matthew about the importance of basically making sure that we get the design right so it's culturally safe, it's welcoming, and it means that people feel good to come there. Uncle Bunja has been a key part of that working group that we've been running. It is a pilot program with the Government Architect's Office, and it is really about making sure that we design the spaces so that they are the right place for people to feel welcoming. And as Amanda mentioned, one of those key objectives is making sure that birthing on country is achieved through the design of this project. So far we've been working with the community. We've had a design jam which took place in June last year. We also met a bit earlier this year. We had we had some meetings with the community and our architects to actually go through in a bit more detail what that might look like. That also includes artwork, as one of my colleagues mentioned earlier. Artwork is a really important part of this whole process, and we really want to make sure that we can engage with as many people as we can to ensure that that work is in place in the hospital, because that's also part of the wellbeing approach that the community want to see, and it helps with the healing process. Another thing that is also really key to this process, the project that we find in all rural and regional areas, is the local employment opportunities, and that's something that we get asked quite a lot about. How can people partake in that process? We do see in other projects that there is a real uptick in local employment opportunities. There's local economic benefits that actually are not just for subcontractors, but they're also for suppliers, coffee shops, the local grocery shops, accommodation, all of that kind of thing. So there is a real multiplier effect that we do find in these projects, and that. I know that it's been a really hard time, obviously, over the last, bushfires and then COVID, and I know that that's really hit the tourism industry hard, and that makes it that the economic benefits are really quite significant with a project of this size. And just an example of that, we've recently completed a regional project where we had 50% of all the subcontractors and suppliers were engaged from the local area itself. Sorry, excuse me. Just need do the numbers. And also about 3/4 of the people that were working on the site were living in the local region. So there is a really significant impact on the local economy. We also do run, under the New South Wales Government, Aboriginal participation in construction policy. There is targets that we work with the contractor on, actually ensuring that we make sure that we get a target of Aboriginal women and other stakeholders into this process, to make sure that we really engage and we really embed the benefits of this project through as many people and into the community as we possibly can. These projects are they provide an incredible opportunity for people to learn skills, to get trained, and we're looking forward to really engaging with the community once we get to that point in the process. I'm almost finished, so it's really just, again, thank you for your time today. Appreciate everybody coming here and listening. We'll stop talking now. If you want to get involved, we've got the website, we've got the project email, and there's a range of other ways that you can get involved, and particularly through the Slido process. So I'm going to hand back to Scott, and thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you to all our panellists. So now we're over to you. There's been great questions coming through on this that I've been attempting to try and consolidate and pull together so we can get through as many as possible. I will remind you that the beauty of this system is not only can you add questions, but you can upvote them, you can like them. So I encourage you again, if you haven't already, pop on, because as I'm sorting through these and taking questions as well as from the room, it'll help me work out what you want me to get to as a priority. All right, to kick it off, I'm going to begin by asking a question from here, and then we'll start coming from the room. But there is a question, there's a bunch of questions around not just attracting staff, which I think builds to some of what the Minister was talking about, but also accommodating them. So I'm just going to read out, there was a question here about, is there a plan to incentivise health staff to the area, given the current nursing and medical staffing deficits? And then there's another question that's quite highly voted, which is, what are we doing about accommodating construction and then later medical staff? So they're thinking about those two waves of workforce. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you. And can I start off with the last part first, and that is that we certainly are looking to try and get as many new staff attracted as possible, but Minister Taylor and I have been working with the federal government this isn't just a problem for the Eurobodalla, this is a problem for regions all across all across Australia. My Labor and Liberal colleagues, I work very closely with the Labor health ministers. Obviously, we've come to know and love each other during COVID, daily conversations, and we all have the same problem. So we've been working with the federal government, trying to develop new methods of getting staff to come to the regions. Particularly with doctors, it's a challenge because the doctors themselves, sometimes in various areas you might have, as we have here. I know there are a number of VMO GPs who work as, for example, in maternity, and they need to be given not only the support and the skill sets, but they also need to be given an attraction financially to actually come to the hospital and do the job. So we've been working with the federal government. We've had a couple of conferences just recently, one in Wagga Wagga and one in Dubbo. And we've actually got the federal government to do a trial program where they're amending some provisions that would otherwise stop us being able to have a doctor employed in their own practice, but also being paid for by the state government. So there are a number of initiatives going on there. In terms of the nursing fraternity, nurses are crucial, absolutely crucial in any hospital. one of the issues there that we are working with local government is to try and get local government to make sure that they understand when we get nurses that come into a regional area, we do everything possible to attract them. Last time I was here, I was actually talking to some of the nurses at Maria who'd just come in. And they had a variety of reasons. Some of them have actually already decided this is the best spot, and they've come with family, husband or wife, and they've decided that this is the place for them. But to try and make it more attractive is the single biggest issue. In terms of housing, again, in all regional areas is a huge problem. I was in, obviously, Lismore just yesterday, and even before the floods and before the apocalypse that's happened in Lismore, there was a shortage of housing. And again, the same issues occurring there in terms of how do we, when we get back to it, how do we get the nursing staff and increase the numbers. We're working with local government, as I said, to try and ensure that there is better development of housing generally. Health can't be the only provider of housing. That's, I mean, our prime purpose is obviously to get staff, but also to get the hospitals. We have to work with local government, we have to work with the federal government. So a lot of work going on behind the scenes at the moment. I think having talked to those nurses though, last time I was here, there's the beauty of Maria is it is a magnificent, or the Eurobodalla generally, it's a magnificent area. Unfortunately, well, fortunately if you already own a home, the values have gone up. Unfortunately, if you want to buy a home, the values have gone up. So it makes it challenging. But all I can tell you at this stage is we're working on that. The priority at the moment is to get the hospital built and do what we can, though, with our local government colleagues and our federal government to try and make it attractive for both housing and for staff.
Thank you, Minister. Matt, did you want to add anything to that?
Just to talk quickly to construction workforce. Yeah. Ordinarily, when we go through our procurement process, we will identify builders that we will ask to provide a competitive tender. And one of the activities that the builder considers in bringing a workforce to this area is things like how they're going to house them if they've got a need to maybe go and buy some houses for their trades or their workers. Otherwise, there is a reliance there too upon trying to use as much local employment opportunities as possible. We will have some more information on trade opportunities, local employment opportunities on the project at a later point when we get to things like having trade breakfasts and the like in the lead up to starting work on site when we're in that stage of procuring a builder. But it certainly is something that we do ask our procurement partners to assist in.
Can I just add to that? Everything you do in life has a good side and a bad side. The good side is we're building a magnificent new hospital. The bad side is, and a good side is that we probably, if I look at all the hospitals we've built, on a hospital this size, usually somewhere in the order of about 600 to 800 FTE staff will be working on the site. There may be hundreds on one day there. So some of those will come from further afield, some will be local. So those challenges around accommodation, doesn't matter where it is, it's even the same thing happens in Sydney if you're building a hospital out west and they're all coming from down the south or out north. It is a challenge. But on the other hand, it does provide a massive economic stimulus to regional towns when all these people come in to build. And on top of that, the government, as part of its policy, which has worked really well, has ensured that, for example, people who have older people, younger people who may not have had work experience and don't know what they want to do can come on site as part of a strategy and get them experienced in some of the aspects of building. And certainly the same issues apply to the Aboriginal community. We generally try and make sure there's a percentage of Aboriginal young people, or Aboriginal people generally, who are on site learning and often going to apprenticeships. Gosford Hospital, which was a similar cost to this, about 300 million, give or take. I think there were 58 people on there from Aboriginal background just learning and doing apprenticeships. So it really does stimulate the whole area in a way that has a long-lasting impact.
Excellent, thank you. As promised, I'm going to alternate with the room, so bear with us. What Emily and I are going to try and do is keep us track as best we can of hands that go up, and I'll alternate it with these ones as we go. So can I have, I think it's Kim, isn't it, at the front? Emily's going to come up with the mic. Thanks, Kim. If you don't mind, generally, pop up, introduce yourself, ask the question. Thanks, Kim.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Hall. My family have owned and been custodians of Braemar Farm, which is the proposed site, for the past 51 years. 2 questions, and I'll put some context to this. Minister Hazzard, in early February you attended Mona Vale and made a presentation. You discussed at that time that the land
where
required...
was it, Kim? Where did I go in February?
Early February, you're in Maria.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Mona Vale.
Maria, sorry.
Okay, I thought you said Mona Vale. I probably was, but that isn't relevant to this.
Good coffee in Mona Vale, as there is in Maria. The presentation involved the area to be used by the hospital. We've had, over the period of discussions with health, 6 different areas of land proposed to us that the hospital would take. So we're a little confused. You mentioned in that presentation that the hospital didn't need flood-prone land or other lands that are not of use, not developable.
I didn't actually address that. I think somebody else addressed that.
And it was...
you're talking about back in February?
In February, yes.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And I might just ask, just because I'm conscious of time, what we might do,
I'll be brief.
You'll be brief, but I'll also let you ask the full question, and then we'll quickly jump around. Yeah.
I'll be brief. You mentioned at that stage that the hospital site required 17 hectares of land, both for the planned facility and for future expansion. I would appreciate your confirmation today that that is the proposal, at 17 hectares of land, as you announced at that stage. And secondly, to health in general, I'd like to ask, we've been proposing since mid-November for the valuers that we've employed and the valuers that health have employed to get together and discuss and negotiate, and we've asked on several occasions, and it has not occurred. I have been told that the period for negotiation finishes on the 21st of March. That's Monday. Call me cynical, here we are one day before that, and we haven't yet had an opportunity to negotiate. Why not?
Thanks, Kim. Thank you.
Kim, thank you for acknowledging that there's been a lot of work going on back and forth. I acknowledge your position in terms of the long ownership of your family, and I'm sorry that the community is going to have to ask for that land in the way that it has through the processes. And I know from the discussions we had just before, up the back of the room, that you aren't particularly satisfied with aspects of those processes. But can I also say that once the proposed acquisition notice was served on you or your company, I'm not sure which because I don't get involved in those matters, that's not a matter for a politician to be involved in. Once that was served on you at the end of December, it becomes a matter that really is in a forum that this is not the appropriate forum for that discussion to take place. You have to actually work through those issues. I can say in a broader sense, obviously I remember sitting in a room with 260 homeowners and it was a terrible experience at Prince of Wales, which was a $750 million redevelopment, and there were 260 homes that were being resumed, and there were people who negotiated quickly and arrived at a position. There were people who held out for higher prices, and that was their entitlement, but it didn't get negotiated quickly, and as a result of that, there was quite a degree of anguish and agony in that situation. That is the range of things that can happen. You are entitled to have those discussions through your lawyers or yourself if you don't, but I understand you've got lawyers. I'm also, in addition to being a science teacher, a lawyer and a minister, I understand from the legal perspectives that this is not the appropriate forum for the questions you've asked. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say, again, my apologies at a personal level that your land is going to be, well, it is being resumed. Well, you know that, you just said that. But you and the taxpayers of New South Wales, that is represented by the government, in this case represented by Health Infrastructure, have to come to a position which is reasonable for you and reasonable for taxpayers. Beyond that, I'm not going to say anything further, and I'm not even going to ask the Health Infrastructure people to do because they shouldn't be in this forum. As I said, I'm not going to comment on that at all because it's something which you and Health Infrastructure have to resolve, and I'm not going to say any more, Kim.
What I would suggest...
It's not as if, I mean, I know, as I complimented you earlier on the massive development you did, or the very good development you did in the other part of town, you understand probably better than most people in the room the legal requirements that have to go through, and I'm not going to buy into compromising the legal position of taxpayers or you. It's better that it be dealt with privately, and you've got lawyers doing that. Let's leave it to the lawyers, okay?
Yeah, thank you. And look, Kim, I think, we've had the benefit of that being, aired in the sense that you heard that the community has heard that loud and clear as well. So what I'm going to do, bearing in mind we've got about half an hour and plenty more to go through, is I'm going to move us to one of the other kind of themes that's been coming out about here, which is this question of the proximity of some of the services to nearby residents. And I know that, Matt, you spoke about that a little bit. So this is, raising the car park, the helipad, the secondary access. Some of the questions are essentially around whether any of this can be revised, but also what considerations have been given to these residents nearby those services in the current proposal. So just a bit of that story, if possible. But also, there's this question here, can you confirm that the secondary access will not be used by the public and construction vehicles? I don't know if you're positioned to speak to that.
I can address as much of that as I possibly can.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So the first part of it, I understand, is the proximity of services to the hospital building. Oh, thanks, Emily, yes. The proximity of the building, car park services to residential areas, and have residents been considered as part of that process? One thing I will say there is that absolutely residents have been considered, and not only have we considered residents in trying to achieve a better outcome than what we could have, we need to be able to demonstrate that. So that will be something that we include as part of our environmental impact statement that Amanda spoke to earlier. We need to appropriately assess acoustic requirements, acoustic effects of this new facility, and we need to be able to demonstrate that the local community has been considered as part of that process. And that is part of the environmental impact statement that is being prepared and is due to be made publicly available in the middle of the year. I think further to that, and something I did speak to when I was talking, was that some of the community members did express concern when we were presenting this information. I think it was about three weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. And we did commit at that time to go away and review the location of those services, particularly the helipad, to those residents in that area of the site. And we are still working on that. As I mentioned, there is a lot of considerations into this piece of work. It's not just as simple as, we can just move that and it doesn't have a flow-on impact. It has a cascading effect on other services on that site. So we are working through that with aviation consultants, architects, landscape consultants, and the appropriate advice. And we are committed to coming back to the community in April to share what we've achieved out of that. And I will say achieved because we did say at the time we will do as much as we can to accommodate the residents in that area of the site. I think the second question was about construction access. Oh, thank you.
Just in terms of construction, when we set up our contracts with health infrastructure, we will set out a range of requirements that the contractor will need to adhere to, and all of those considerations will come into that. I would say that the main construction access will always be from the highway. We would definitely not want people accessing the site from the residential side. We won't want contractors parking there and disrupting you. So we will ensure that we put those things into our contract. We may even talk to council about how we can better police that if there's a way to do that as well. So we'll work through those things in the planning space. It would only be if there was some exception that something couldn't be done from that side of the site that we would need to do that on a case-by-case basis. But I'd also encourage you, certainly as part of the planning approval process, if you can submit those things, that actually helps us as well, because Department of Planning will also look at that, and there will likely be conditions around that as well. But regardless, we'll put it into our contract to ensure that that's the case.
Thanks, Amanda. And yeah, I'm also taking away from that, Matt, that this is an ongoing conversation that is being had around those things. So thank you. I might actually, if you don't mind, I'll come here, and then there's probably another transport-related question we can ask. We've just got someone coming with a mic. Thank you. Do you mind just popping up, introduce yourself? And I will ask, in the interest of me getting through the rest of this, if you can try and keep it to question. Yeah,
I'll have to sit down after I say. I'm Janet Hamer. I live in Maria for 35 years, 37 actually. I just would like to ask about the acquiring of paediatricians, paediatric registrar. the maternity services, we propose 4 beds by 2021, is not even anywhere near a level 4, not even anywhere near a level 3. For a level 3, you have to have access to a 24-hour paediatric registrar and a 24-hour paediatrician. With 4 beds proposed to 2031, that isn't really adequate enough to attract those doctors. And I know neighbouring health services are paying very, very large amount of money, blowing out their budgets for locums, and you have to pay their accommodation, their flights, and I can only see that our way is going to go like that. And that's in your New South Wales Health delineation stats.
Thank you. What was it? Was it Janet? Janet, lovely to meet you. Yeah, so first of all, just before we pass over to the Minister, we'll acknowledge that partially as a comment as well. So I think you've raised that and that's been heard by others in the team and recorded. But over to you, Minister.
Janet, can I just say, I mean, you're right about trying to attract doctors, and you have to have a core number of beds sometimes. I mean, I know at our local Mona Vale Hospital, for example, we had 1 intubated bed, and it was always impossible to get an intensivist to come. But the advice that health has given us is that we can actually work towards achieving exactly what you're saying at the moment and expressing concerns about. All I can say is that we're doing our best, our very best, to make sure this service has the best attraction for each of the various specialties that we need. And if we need to do more as we progress, we will. But at the moment, it's going to be like light years between what we've currently got. I think the staff at Maria, who I've met quite a few of them, do a fantastic job. But we need to actually provide the magic, if you like, in the building to attract the staff. And if it needs more, one of the beauties of the current approach to health generally is the flexible capacity of moving people into, or moving different sections around in terms of the wards. And certainly, I mean, paediatrics, you've got to obviously have certain provisions that you would understand by the sound of it. Yeah, well, but what they're talking about at the moment is having that capacity to move people around, move the sections around. I know yesterday up at Lismore they were talking about exactly the same issue in terms of what they have done moving through that flexible approach as we build a new hospital. So I think it'll work. Certainly the advice from health is it'll work, but I think you raising it today, I'll ask health to look at that issue again. No problem. Thank you. Are you a nurse by any chance, or are you? You were a nurse? Well, okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think...
Janet, thank you for being a nurse, and thank you for being someone who's involved in health. Thank you.
Yeah. And as I said, this is all, part of flagging some of these things as part of us. I understand that we're all just coming from the perspective of this being as good a thing as it can be. So thank you. I note the Minister's comment there about following that up. I would like to just touch on some transport-related questions that are coming up. So in the Slido, we've talked about whether discussions with Transport about the Maria bypass are happening, and we heard from Matt that they are. Right, but there's some follow-up questions around, given key access will be through Maria Main Street, is there any plan in place to improve flow for those travelling south from the bay to access the hospital? And interestingly, then another question is also, does health have any concerns about the fact that the preferred Maria bypass route will not deliver patients from the north directly to the hospital? Are you able to talk to that anymore?
I can, yes.
Thanks, Matt.
No. I need to make that clear at the outset that we can't speak on behalf of Transport, and that a lot of the matters you speak about there are Transport for New South Wales related issues. So in terms of traffic heading south, that's not really a New South Wales Health matter that we can really address. In terms of access to the preferred strategic corridor, we are aware that the access to the hospital site here to the southern connection point of that preferred strategic corridor is approximately 1 kilometre from this point, this roundabout, this intersection here, and that would provide from that roundabout to the southern connection point of that preferred corridor 1 kilometre, and you're onto the bypass. And that's something that Transport's been considering as part of their design. Certainly we've been working closely with them to get to that point.
Thank you. So, okay, I guess once again acknowledging that there is an awareness of some of these challenges and what's required for the hospital to work well, and that conversation is ongoing, but thank you. I'm going to take from the room. We've already got someone lined up.
Hello, my name's Margie Otapi. I'm the chairperson of the Circle Foundation Cooperative. My question is about future development on the site. The Circle Foundation has a vision to be co-located at Eurobodalla Hospital to provide allied health, social prescription, research and evaluation and consumer engagement services to Eurobodalla, with the aim of really being more preventative, early intervention health. So it's a kind of adjunct to hospital care, if you like, and an early intervention approach to healthcare. And I'm wondering, how do you actually consult with an organisation like ours? We want to collaborate with other organisations like Katungal and Yamba Disability Services, Early Child Intervention Services. There are a range of groups that we could co-locate with on a site at Eurobodalla to provide support, particularly for people with chronic health issues, and which there are a very significant number in the Eurobodalla area. How can we engage with you and, I guess to be blunt, get some money and resources to build this sort of visionary centre which is based on healing architecture principles? The Circle Foundation has a board, we have a vision, but we need the support, and obviously we've already started to talk to Andrew, Constance and Michael Holland and Bonnie Taylor we're going to approach as well. Haven't got to you yet, Brad, but hope to, about how do we... This is about supporting the future of the community in a way that keeps people out of hospital. How do we sort of do that?
I'm sorry, what's your first name?
Margie Otapi.
Margie.
Good Irish name, Brad.
Happy St Patrick's Day, almost. Margie, look, first of all, I think that your concepts are very good concepts, very good. I know, having sat next to Andrew for I don't know how many years in Parliament, in many meetings, he was often in my ear about what might happen here. And I know he's busy has been talking to, I think it was, which university was it? You were talking to university, which one? Sorry?
All three, and
Okay, well, I knew he was in my ear about all the educational facilities he's talking to, about trying to get some co-location, because obviously hospitals do their best when they have educational facilities, research facilities, but what you're talking about is another dimension. And I think there's no instinctive opposition. In fact, as I listened to what you were saying, then I'm thinking, sounds good. I think if you talk to Andrew, because he's got my numbers, just tee up a meeting, or Bronnie, or for that matter, Dr. Holland, but he rings me every night. so that is, Andrew does. So just give him the details and I'll organise a meeting for you and have a bit of a chat, no problem. I'm actually really excited about what you're talking about. I think that'd be very interesting.
Do you know there's nothing in Australia, probably by going in the UK, that is the only model that we've come across that's anything like it?
I'm very interested to follow it up. I think what you're really talking about is a holistic sort of, and to a degree almost, it is preventative. So, yeah, come and talk to me. Yeah.
I feel like I need to give you
Talk to
two, like
Andrew.
a glass of wine each and let you go off somewhere. Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, I'm gonna keep moving through. So there is a couple of questions, and please forgive me, people, for trying to bundle a few things. I just want to make sure we can get through stuff. But there's some things talking about the suitability of the site in some different ways, right? So the first one is, has been posted, this idea of the land has several constraints: flooding, bushfire asset protection zone, and artefacts. Given those, you have located it in a corner of a vast tract. Why? And then more broadly, there's some questions about, I'm checking my notes here, why Moruya, not Bateman's Bay, where the population is larger? Why here? So I think what I would invite you, if that's okay, speaking specifically about the site, but also this broader idea, not just why not Bateman's Bay, but this idea of the broader servicing of the region. We know that that's some things that have been raised as concerns.
I'll just talk about the second one first, if that's okay. So when we actually mapped out the population and the spread and the geographics, Moruya was the obvious choice in terms of travel times from Narooma, and obviously Bateman's Bay is not as far away. That was the logical space. We did look, I guess, from a site perspective, across Bateman's Bay and Moruya. Bateman's Bay is very constrained in terms of land. It would have needed to be residential, and the bushfire proximity was quite close, but it was more around the geographic spread of the region that it was servicing. And I think that's all I need to say on that. What was the second part of the question?
Just the constraints.
Oh, the constraints. I might hand over to you, Matt, for that.
Thank you. So just quickly, I understand the question was why this site, noting the constraints that are in place?
So they're flagging the awareness of. I'm bringing it up here. It's disappeared from my list, sorry. But yes, you've got quite a constrained site. Why have things ended up the way they are? Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I think the reason the way things ended up the way they are is because of the constraints on the site. And I'll talk quickly to the site selection process that we went through in 2020. We looked at a broad range of sites, as Amanda pointed out, across Batemans Bay and Moruya. When we fine-tuned that to Moruya, there was a number of sites across Moruya that were assessed as well. And I think what I can suggest is that a lot of the sites across Moruya had constraints. It's not just this site, that there is a significant amount of flooding issues located close to the Moruya town centre that I'm sure everyone is aware of. I'm sure that everyone witnessed the bushfire issues that came through here not 2 years ago. So there are constraints across any site that we were considering. This site, I think, through the process that we went through, was selected for the reasons that it had the room to grow. We've heard the feedback about the constraints or the close consideration to neighbours, which we're addressing. But I think the bottom line was that the site went through a rigorous selection process.
And that rigorous process, is there any documentation somewhere where people can go to get more of a feel for that?
We can include some information on the project website around that acquisition process, just in the frequently asked questions of the site.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks. Thank you, Matt. Lovely.
I might just add, we did do test fits on the site, and this site we actually selected because it was, I think, the largest site, so that we knew that we could have future expansion. We knew there were constraints, but we could work with them. Many of the other sites were a lot smaller.
So hearing some of the logic there, bearing in mind there are lots of constraints, but it sounds like there might be a bit of info we can share to help better understand some of that process that we went through. I'm going to see if I can take, this could be maybe one of the last ones from the room, and then I'm going to take a couple that we've got on here. This gentleman here with the very decorative mask.
Hi, my name's Brett Stevenson. I just wanted a couple of points of clarification about some information that were presented. There was a SEARS, SEARS report mentioned. I just had a quick look at the website for the hospital and I couldn't find it. I'm just wondering if it's tucked away somewhere, but I'm just wondering if that's actually publicly available at the moment. And also the work that's being done on the access was in regards to both Transport for New South Wales, but there's also a role with council mentioned in regard to that. And I was just wondering which section of council were you dealing with, and what access aspects were you talking to council about?
Thank you. Two parts to that question. So the first part. Yeah, so there was about the SEARS, yeah. Look, it's available on the Department of Planning website, the major project portal. It's not the project-specific site. Department of Planning managed that process, and so they have a project page set up specifically for the Eurobodalla Regional Hospital. I checked this morning myself, the SEARS aren't on there, but we've requested, we've asked the department to correct that. So I think that's a good point. Amanda just mentioned we'll provide a link on our website to that planning portal, so it's easy to find. And the second part of the question was which department of council? Thank you. We've been dealing with all departments in council, so the planning department, the engineering and technical department, and also some of the arts and culture departments as well. So it's wide ranging. When we've been consulting with council and transport on the bypass, it's about the future use of Moruya. And we've been asked to consider and to contribute what happens and what is part of that conversation about the main street or the main part of town. Now, health can't do a lot in that space, but we are building a place that is a hospital. It's going to attract a lot of people and a lot of staff. And as Amanda and Kat talked to, there's services that go with that. There's doctors, nurses, there's coffee shops, there's those sorts of things. So how can we make that part of a richer Moruya? And that's something that we're working with council on, and I understand that council are very interested in that process with the bypass taking place as well. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to take this gentleman here. Just introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Jeff DeJager's my name. I'm a resident of Caswell Street, but I won't ask you about the helipad because we'll hear about that in April. What I am interested in is the future infrastructure blue spots on the plan.
Yes.
We've heard that there will be on-site accommodation for carers and there will be on-site clinical training facilities. Will one of those blue spots look after those things? And the second part of the question, because all of the questions have got two parts, there are a number of other infrastructure projects that have been announced for the Maria area, including an emergency operations centre and for relocation facilities for some of the emergency services and their facilities. Has Health been integrating their planning to make sure those projects can proceed without any wastage overall?
Thank you, Jeff. I might answer the first part and pass over to Amanda for the second part. So the first element was the blue blobs. Yes, one of the blobs is site accommodation for carers, staff and students considered to accommodate a wide range of different services on the site. The simulation lab that we were talking about as part of the scope is inside the main hospital building, but one of the blue blobs does accommodate education growth, if you will, as in, I think, the Australian National University at the moment have a clinic, a rural medical school at Bateman's Bay that's not part of the hospital, and there may be an opportunity in the future to develop something like that with a tertiary provider, but there's certainly nothing in place at the moment. You happy to answer the question on the...
It's quite a popular site. So in terms of carers accommodation, that's not something we're building as part of the current hospital, but we're happy to work with the district to explore options on that as we move forward. Certainly on other hospitals, there's been a partnership arrangement for some of that carer accommodation. In terms of the emergency services hub, yes, council have discussed, I will raise that with us. I understand it, they may now have some funding. We need to look at all of those blue blobs and decide what's most appropriate for this site. And, you know, we've had lovely Marg up there talk about Circle Foundation. There's been talk about education, carers accommodation, staff accommodation. So we just need to make sure we've got the right fit for what is a hospital site before we, I guess, move forward with any of those things.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Jim. You know what we're going to do, if that's okay? You're going to be our last one, if that's all right. And then I'm just going to ask for some final comments and what our project team and the Minister are taking away from what we've been discussing today. And I will just take the chance to reassure as we come to our last question that we have captured, particularly on the Slido, the other questions. Thank you to whoever's streaming us online and adding questions there as well. You have heard that the project team will share those FAQs. So we will get to those questions in some form, even though we're running out of time. So I'm going to check in with this wonderful woman here, and then we'll hear some final words.
Thank you. My name is Tisha Ennis. My husband Michael is an oncology patient. I'm about to drive up to Canberra for the third time in 3 weeks this afternoon. My question is to Minister Brad Hazzard. Thank you. Is there going to be any improvement in the interim in the care for oncology patients before this hospital arrives?
I can tell you that...
Thank you.
What's your husband's name, sorry?
My name is Tish.
And your husband? Michael. Sorry, Michael. First of all, Michael, I hope that everything is going okay, and certain is not going okay. All right, well, thinking of you. Look, we've been trying to find a balance with health. This is not necessarily the local health district per se. Local health district is working with the ministry to see what they can do to encourage an improved oncology service in the Eurobodalla. And we're working with the federal government as well, because we understand there's around about 200 people and this is off the top of my head, per week that actually require those sorts of services. And we're working with them. I can't give you a guarantee now, but it's very much up there in terms of the radar, trying to get both the federal government and the private sector and the local health district to work together. But I can't give you an answer specifically now. I know for me to know that number. It's obviously in my head, and I've been working also with Bronnie Taylor as the Regional Health Minister, we're all trying to find some solution to it. But I do know that we have to get, one of the problems is to attract the level of specialists. Again, it comes back to the same problem, especially in terms of the nurses and especially in terms of, obviously, the oncologists to be here to provide the various services as well. What we're being told is that that number will not attract the major facilities that we need here, but we're looking at all options and seeing if the federal government can kick in extra money to try and help. So we'll do what we can, and I'm sorry, Michael. I know it's a pain in the butt. I've driven that King's Highway, and it's a pain in the butt, particularly when you're feeling well. It's a pain. Actually, I shouldn't use that expression as a minister, should I? It's not the best when you're driving up the King's Highway, but if you're not feeling well, it would be even worse. So yeah.
Thank you, Minister. So look, I have attempted to drive us right up to the line because I wanted to squeeze as many questions as I could out, and we did start a little bit late as people were coming in. So I'm just, with that in mind, going to check in maybe with the Minister and then with Matt for any final words you've got. What are you taking away from this? Are there any particular takeaways, any key ideas? Minister, did you want to just finish off?
Well, actually, what I just heard has got nothing to do necessarily with what we were talking about, but I'm right on that one. So I'll ask some questions when I get back next week to the Ministry about that issue. Can I just say thank you to all of you? I know building a hospital is not something that happens very frequently in a local community. So obviously, there's lots of thoughts and lots of questions. And I mean, it's interesting that even Jeff's comment that he lives right there on the street that's so close to possibly a helicopter pad, and you didn't raise that issue today, presumably. Well, Matt I know is working on it, because I said to him, can he please do whatever he can, subject to topography and all those things, because the helicopters we now have, they're called AW139s, they're fast and they can long range, and they get patients to where they need to be, the top specialist, as quickly as possible, but they also have a fair bit of noise and a fair bit of down thrust. So, but you didn't ask that question. You're asking broader questions, and people in this room today have been asking those broader questions about what you're going to get for your community. So I just want to thank you all for that. Very little in the way of self-interest, more what are we doing here for our community? So as your health minister and as having the regional health minister here as well, I just want to thank you for coming along, giving up your time and listening to what's being said. I promise you this hospital is going to be built as quickly as humanly possible, in the same way that we've done all the others. The money is there, the intent is there, the commitment is there, and we're going to do everything we can to try and make it more attractive for other nurses and other doctors with the specialties to come into town. And again, I want to thank Marg Bennett and her health team. I mean, when you're in charge of an LHD, you tend to cop it from every different direction, no matter what you do. Thank you, Marg. It's a rough job. I appreciate everything you've done. I think you're an outstanding Chief Executive. Amanda and her team, Kath and Matt, thank you. Having seen the commitment that you guys have been applying to this the last couple of years, 2.5, nearly 3 years now, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the community. We are going to get there, and it'll be open, and I'm hoping that all of you will be at that opening in 3 years' time and enjoying it. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Please, Minister has it. Level 4.
There we go. Thank you, everyone. I can see that people are leaving, and I think our project team has got their actions that they've taken away, so thank you very much. Please grab any final refreshments on your way out if you like. Have a lovely afternoon and weekend. Safe trips home. Thank you, everyone.